Hello, thank you for joining. This paper presentation is called Electronic Monitoring in Post-Secondary Ontario. Does surveillance stifle academic freedom? My name is Tim Ribaric, presently a PhD student at Brock University. So first, a quick note to describe what led me here. The following presentation and research has many different traditions and methodologies mixed all together. I have grad experience in computer science. Professionally, I'm a librarian. I have some interests in labor issues, and I'm, as mentioned, currently pursuing my PhD in educational studies. So all of these different parts of my background inform and sort of lead me to the proposed research I'm going to talk about today. So nice segue into the agenda for today's talk. I'll be looking at academic freedom, then describing the Working for Workers Act, a bit about what I'm proposing as my computational analysis methods, then a quick look at the insights that I've gleaned through my investigation to date, and then a bit of a wrap up. So just to get on the same page, academic freedom typically is conceptualized as having four constituent pieces: the freedom to teach, the freedom to research, the freedom to engage in governance of the institution, and freedom to engage in the public sphere. In North America, particularly in Canada, academic freedom is codified in legally defensible collective agreements. So over successive rounds of negotiations, language that articulates what academic freedom is, how it's defended, what kind of rights and responsibilities it bestows upon faculty members is enshrined. Of course, there are lots of different threats to academic freedom, both apparent and not so apparent. And it's always useful to look at different components of life in the academy through a lens of will this interfere with, interact with, or compromise academic freedom in some respect. So last year, the PC Ford government passed a legislation called the Working for Workers Act, and it was a bill that meant to provide updates to the Employment Standards Act. It had a variety of different obligations and requirements that it created, but one of particular note is that it obligated non-Crown workplaces in the province of over 25 employees to create something called an electronic monitoring policy. These policies would stipulate in what conditions and how electronic monitoring would be applied to the workplace. So the government provided lots of advice on what these policies should have, how they should be structured, and sort of what inclusion criteria they should have. Also of interest to note is that the timeline to implement these policies was rather short. So with all of these pieces laid out, what we can do now is consider the research question that I'm investigating. Does the content of the electronic monitoring policy written by each Ontario university conflict with the tenets of academic freedom? So that's the particular question. Now, the motivation for asking that question, or what I hope to accomplish with this investigation. What I want to do is demonstrate the viability of a mixed method paradigm that uses quantitative tools to inform qualitative document analysis. So often a researcher or research team will sit down with a platform such as NVivo to look at a collection of documents, and through successive iterations of reviewing the documents, tag them, develop themes, and ultimately devise insights upon those themes that are apparent within the documents. What I would like to do is augment this process by introducing a few computationally inspired methods to help sort of ground any observations in sort of mathematically or sort of occurring phenomenon in the documents. So what I'm going to do is focus on two different methods, which I'll dub one called a syntactic method, and it's based on something called term frequency inverse document frequency. And what that does is match exact phrasing used in the document in the policy documents, regardless of the order that they're specified in. And this gives us the opportunity to match sort of phrases in the policy documents between one another. The next method I'll use is something I'm dubbing a semantic analysis. That will be built on an algorithm and modeling called latent diacritic analysis. And basically, it decomposes documents into their basic expressions and then identifies latent topics found within these documents. So the grand design is that we take these tools, apply them to the policy documents, analyze their results, and use those insights to guide a hand tagging analysis. So the great thing about these algorithms is that they produce quite verbose output that can be visualized. So this heat map is a comparison of all the monitoring policies against one another using the TF-IDF platform to determine how similar the phrasing is in each of the documents. So at a glance, we can see that Waterloo's document is very dissimilar from the rest of the policy documents, as well as Laurentian. So this gives us a little bit of background to take into our analysis of the documents. Further, we can look at the full text of the policy documents using our TF-IDF comparison platform to take a look at phrasing used in the documents to see sort of what unique phrases are used and to get a sense of what are common phrasing. You see here we have another example of two very dissimilar policy documents, and the displays of the documents are tagged up using our TF-IDF vector, which demonstrates to us what phrasing is common or unique to the whole collection of documents and to the two documents that we are comparing. So next, just a few words about how the LDA model is constructed. Instead of looking at text directly as it is written, we need to pre-process it, and this requires several steps. We remove all the stop words, construct bigrams, lematize to the root word. And after things are done, we end up retaining only about 10% of our original document. And then the thing to keep in mind is there are lots of ways to look at LDA output. You might be familiar with the little bulb diagrams that show topics modeled with circles of various diameters to indicate how strong topic presence is within the documents. However, what I found most useful is to create a heat map of topic constituency for each of the documents that I looked at. So what we have here is a snapshot of how the LDA model classified our electronic monitoring policy documents. So rows represent schools' documents, columns represent the different topics the LDA model found and allocated to each of the monitoring policy documents. So we see a strong grouping around topic 1, as many of the policy documents are classified by that. We see some outliers. Topic 4 has a strong amount of presence that's different than topic 1, similarly with topic 5. So we can take all of these little bits and treat them as signals that help us understand the latent differences between the documents and what is within them and how they compare to one another. So it's just some preliminary insights that I've gathered so far using these combined methods, looking at these policies. The University of Ottawa is the only document in the collection that specifically mentions academic freedom. University of Waterloo's policy is also anomalous. We can see that in evidence both from the TF-IDF comparisons and the LDA modeling. And perhaps we could say that this matches our intuition that Waterloo might be treated differently as they are not a unionized institution. Another thing I was able to determine by looking at the documents is the document generated by the universities that it uses terminology fairly unique in the policy collection, which might provide more insight or some leads into why it should be looked at closer. Laurentian document is also anomalous, and similarly here we get evidence from both models to stipulate that. The document itself is much longer than most schools, which is curious, and some further analysis will be required. Now just some general statements. All the policies mentioned, or all the policies investigated through these methods, mention that they will respect collective agreement language, which leads me into my next point. There's a lot of adherence in these policies to the guidelines the government produced for their creation. And I missed a point there. There's a lot of evidence of monitoring for the policies of performance of analysis, which could be seen as a post-tenure review, which might be on contravention to, academic freedom. However, all this is just sort of speculation at this point, or it will need to be verified and validated through a further investigation using hand analysis and tagging using the in vivo platform. So I'll just end by saying thank you. My work, if you have any questions about my work or the method, please get in touch. My email address is on the screen there, and thank you for your attention.